I'm just trying to just basically get this into. Good, are we ready? Okay, good. Sorry about that. As I said, we had a power trip on my end, so we just got back off the power. So that should work. Good. Should I continue? Oh.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good, excellent. Right, where were we before? Oh, okay, so generally, I was saying, with your techniques for questionnaires, you want to research a bit on how your responses will be, because when it comes in, is that you have to know how you're going to analyze your data. Every research method that you have selected, you have to be prepared yourself for the different analysis that you're going to do. I'm not going to cover much. I'm going to just briefly touch on each one of these 7 analysis techniques, but that is something for extra reading if you have to. You need to do it anyway, and for possibly another lecture. But this will have been covered in your WEMI modules. So having selected your different research collection methods, in terms of your data collection, we looked at observations, interviews, plus questionnaires, reports, and other sub-techniques, laddering, single-out techniques, case studies. You have to be able to analyze those data in terms of the content, what is said in a text, how it is said, and how often it's said. This is used especially if you do interviews. And remember I talked about the recording device, your equipment. Transcribing interviews is not fun. But if you plan to do interviews, you have to think of yourself, how are you going to collect that data, and you're going to put it into a format for you to analyze it. The discourse analysis, we don't tend to see much of that, depending on unless you're doing a social sciences research, or you're going to be doing focus groups. It says, looking at video work, actually videotaping a session, see the interactions between different team members. So that's another analysis. Knowledge representation is a good way of understanding how knowledge is comes about. Like single-out technique is a good way to use when you're doing knowledge representation. Statistics. A lot of us, especially if we do quantitative research, so surveys are a good way to actually collect statistical data in terms of, and when you have to analyze it, you have to make sure the data in a way that it can be analyzed properly. That's why in designing your questionnaire, what response you use, especially if you want to use statistical tools, the responses are important. And you're going to know your techniques. For example, descriptive statistics, as well as inferential statistics, are tests on other statistical methods we would use to analyze different surveys. And of course, measurement theory. And if you're working in a lab, some of us, if you do robotics, may be having to do measurements. So now, these data analysis tools, I have not covered them. I could not cover them in this lecture. Would have waited close to 2 hours or more, because each of them requires their own separate discussion on their own. So, and I think basically where I've reached is basically recommending further reading, because when I did my research methodologies, I read a couple of good books to help me get there. Especially, there's one I know that's in the library. It's Research Method Guides. This is in the library. I think there's a floor, the 5th floor. Practical research methods and a general guide to research methods. These two, this one here and this one here. I have them in copy, so I was able to read them. Rajan Kumar's book is also in the library Word. This is what I use as well. And I have seen this copy here, a writer's resource, also in the library. So you have 3 of these books here in the library. There's a whole section up on the 5th floor that covers research methodology. You gotta read it. because you have to understand you want to pitfalls you find yourself along the way with research methods. And it's like, wow. But if you have a strong research methodology, that's your principle, and very robust research methods, as in what you use to collect your data and what you use to analyze it and justify why you did it, you are on a good way to actually getting a good grade in your thesis, because that is where the risk comes in. That is where you have to interact. Doing literature review is just really what someone else did, but collecting data, there's a lot of risks there which I've covered hopefully throughout the presentation. So I've actually reached to the Q&A section. If you have any questions, or if you basically know all of this already, which will be a good thing, and this was sort of like a reinforcement, I open the floor. If there are any questions about what I've talked about today, or anything that you have learned on research methods in previous classes that you had with WMG. So, Kelly, that is, okay, we have a question. Okay.
I got one. Can you come over here? Yeah, you might also want to ask him what he did, whether he did questionnaires. That would be interesting.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, Daren. Sudhir, how are you doing?
Yeah, not bad.
I'll start with Annie's question. What did you do for your project? Questionnaires or
Interviews? Or
interviews?
I did what I did. I used reports.
Okay.
So I requested reports from my company. I used something called structured questions. It was asking them 5 specific questions via email. So in a way it was an interview, but it was done via email. So it wasn't like an email question. And I think there's a third one I did. Oh yes, I used participant observation, because I collected data before. It was my professional experience. I worked in supply chain, so I did my work, my research work on my supply chain department. And since I was a member of the team, I was just wrote down what I remember from them. So I used participant observation. So those 3 techniques I used, plus my literature review question. All right. And when I did for analysis, I used content analysis as my technique. I had to use some statistics as well. I had to justify my population size. So one of the things, even though you do qualitative research, there's still a quantitative part of it where you have to give a statistical reasoning why your sample size was this particular one. My sample size was 15 because there are only about 15 ammonia companies, not plants, ammonia companies around the world. And so that's why my sample size was small. But that's a good question.
And I would also like to know whether he had any issues that people did not respond to his questionnaires, like when he sent them by email. Was there? I think you have to ask that.
All right.
Did you
Annie
understand?
continues in asking that what sort of issues you had with the questionnaires. Did people respond or?
Yes, that is true. For me, that was a big thing. In terms of the questionnaire was basically, I sent it in an email, so it was 5 questions asked in email, was that the response that I got were for people from my old company and colleagues I knew from on the estate, where industrial estate, where all the ammonia companies were. The problem I had were the ones in countries that did not speak my language. Those So even if I had an English website, it was maybe in Bulgaria, it was in Eastern Europe, where I went in Venezuela, they didn't respond. The big thing is the response. The issue is really someone responding to you. And the time it took, because when I mentioned in the presentation, I talked about someone who sent me information in July, right? That was my supervisor, my old supervisor. I sent a request somewhere in April, because I'd reached the stage of my discussion, so I did my work in 2 parts. And she responded 3 months afterwards. I'm like, oh my goodness, I know you, could you just help me? So that's one of the things as well. They won't respond to you, or they respond to you very late. So that's the issues you have to look at when you do questionnaires.
I would also like to know whether he had like.
You better come here.
Yes.
All right. Where do I speak? Just towards
I can hear you.
I would also like to know whether you had like a contingency plan in case that nobody responds. Like, did you have like a plan B in case everything went wrong, or you only have like 3 responses, which is not representative? And then what do you do then? I mean, you can't just not write.
That's right. That's why I said, and I would insist, your questionnaires must not be the only method. What I did was I asked the reports, and I had my background knowledge on who I can work with. So I had that data. And I have to admit, this is what, in my case, I chose an easier approach. I chose a project where I had professional networks, so they would have answered me. All right? So that made it easier for me. If you're doing a project where you don't have that professional network, it's tough. That means you have to start earlier. So your back plan is you start earlier. You would also possibly look at trade groups, like associations. Like if you say you're dealing with risk management and you want to find out about risk management, I believe they're like association for project managers. There's a special risk interest group. So you look at trade groups, because when you trade groups, you actually can get data. A colleague of mine who he graduated this year, Carlos, I don't know if you know Carlos Sierra, Brazilian guy. What he did, he linked up with the special interest group on risk for the Association of Project Managers, and they sent out the service for him. So that's what he did, and it was a good plan. So instead of you as a student sending out your survey, have a professional body send it out to their members, and that could actually be your backup plan. Maybe a better approach. Yeah, but that's a good question. You're welcome.
Now I leave the room for the actual person who wanted to ask a question.
That's what I used to do.
No, that you can go ahead.
She got main question on contingency, but I wanted to get most of the people here would be getting data from a third party or some company they're not associated with. The issue of confidentiality of data.
Yes.
What is the protocol to be followed?
Okay, thank you. It was actually practice to talk about that yesterday. I forgot. Okay, all right. The UK has a Data Protection Act, the 1988 Data Protection Act. You have to clearly state that you intend to protect the data. You may have to actually see if your supervisor or the course office can get involved in actually writing an official letter on an official letterhead indicating that this data would be kept confidential and will be used only for the execution of your thesis. You will also promise that you will offer them a copy of your thesis once it's completed. And that is one of the things that you do. And that is something you have to think of and start early. That's right, because companies take a while to process these requests. And so that's a valid concern. And you need to start writing now. You need to start preparing what you want to ask. and see how the university can help you with that official letter. I understand where you're coming from. When I did my undergraduate research project, I had to do something with the university that dealt with databases, and my department wrote to that other department indicating the confidentiality of the research that's being conducted and that assisted. So contact your supervisor and the WMG course office to see if they can help you organize an official letter in terms of how you would handle that data. I think hopefully that answers your question.
Anyone else can?
What is indicative timeline?
I have to go to the one. You have to go to the one.
Hello.
Hello, Huda. What is your indicative timeline? Like literature review, and then after that what?
Okay, good, very good question. Those of us who would have known me from at least from the Facebook group would have known I've been advocating to complete your lit review before December, but it's past December now. If you've started your literature review, you need to continue reading that, but you need to start looking at your research methods as well. Read up on that, so you know what techniques you want to apply. And hopefully in February, you should at least send out requests for information. Why? Because while you wait for people to respond to you, say for reports or initial feedback to arrange for interviews, arrange for to actually answer what you want, you can continue doing your research. So it has to be done in parallel. Prepare your letters, organize what you want to find out. By the end of the month, by February, you send out a request. When can we meet? Is it possible to organize interviews? So you have to sort of get an introduction. You may have to call. So you need to do all of this early and then do your scheduling. So hopefully you can get something and do interviews, collect your data. Here's a big thing that you need to remember. When you do this interview, you have to transcribe it, which takes a long, say 1 hour of recording might take about 10 hours of transcribing, because you have to listen again and make sure it sounds clean, and then you have to analyze it again. So understand, data collection is the longest phase ever in your project, and you do things in parallel. So you do literature review now, you do requests for information now, you do the data collection somewhere between February to June. It will still happen. You will analyze the data as it comes in, start writing up. You have to do things in parallel, because you also have your P&As as well. So you don't no longer do it linearly. You have to do them in numerous different network diagrams. If you remember from PPMC, you have things happening in a chain, and that's where you are right now. From now until August, you will be multitasking. And I think that's the best way I can answer that question. But again, a very valid question, as always. So,
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, and a pleasure. Good luck in your project, and I'm available via the Facebook group to assist you, especially when it comes to the REMI part. The reason why I took time to actually talk about it is the area that we found that students actually get knocked down on their grades, and if you want a key to actually getting a good grade for your MSc, is actually having a strong REMI method, both methodology and methods. So thank you, good luck, and until we meet again. Okay, bye.
Bye.